Hello and welcome to AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. I'm your host, John S. Today we'll be speaking with John H. from the DC We Agnostics Group. We'll be talking a little bit about his story, about Agnostic AA, his view of atheism, and his article, The Myth of the Angry Atheist. I hope you enjoy. All right. Well, John, it's nice to talk to you. I've been looking forward to this. I'm not sure if I met you in Santa Monica, but I know I met some people from DC. Right. I think I met Barry. Right. Do you recall if we met there?
You know what? I was talking to so many people. I remember your presentations, but it was all sort of a blur. It's quite possible, but in any event, I think we all took away an enormous kind of lift that we got, even though a lot of us, like yourself and myself, been around for a long, long time. I think that the event itself gave us a real boost. I think we all agree on that, whether we talked about it there or not.
Yeah, and what was ironic is when I came back from the convention, there's a gentleman who goes to our meetings here in Kansas City who happens to work in D.C. 1 week a month and goes to your group.
Yeah, and he's my good buddy, Greg O. And
that's right.
I see him I just saw him the other day. He's a wonderful guy, and he's done great service himself in just a few years he's been around. So it just shows how we have synergy, not just with us old timers, but for people that are new to sobriety, and that's that's the part that's most exciting to me.
Well, I love Greg. He when he came into our group, and he came in pretty early, and he said, I go to the We Agnostics meeting in DC, and I was so excited because it's like, oh great, someone who knows what they're doing,
right?
knows how to be an agnostic atheist today.
We hope that we know what we're doing. I mean, we just had our 27th anniversary in September, and as I say in the group history that I wrote, which you've probably seen, even though our founders passed away some years ago, the hope that they had for the group in terms of its functionality and utility to people in our situation, it's still there, and it's a great thing. That's one of the great things about AA is even though we don't believe in an afterlife, folks like us do live on in what we leave behind in the program, and that's like a driving force for me now that I've got my unfortunately have my Medicare card in my pocket. That was a real shock, but as we move along, we understand that we're not going to be here forever. And, what we leave behind us in terms of our contributions to the program are extremely important.
I agree with that. Well, I like to start these conversations a lot with just learning a little bit about the person. Would you like to kind of go into your story a little bit about,
A little bit. I'll give you, I was a devoted drinker from age 15 until age 38. But unlike some of us who believe that they have a genetic component to their alcoholism, and there are no alcoholics in my family other than me. So I believe that I got addicted to alcohol in my college years, sitting on a bar stool in Putney, Vermont. And by the time I graduated from college in 1972, and headed back to Washington, I was thoroughly and totally addicted to alcohol, and in complete and utter denial of the influence it had over my life. Without going into a lot of the gruesome details, suffice it to say, there was a inappropriate marriage, a lost graduate school career, and a lot of other things early on, a couple of encounters with doctors. Fortunately, no encounters with officers of the law. That's one thing I don't have in my resume is any legal issues. But I certainly had a lot of evidence, so that about the time I was about 25 or 26 years old, I should have known what I was doing. And I'll tell one brief war story, and continue on to the end of my drinking and my entry into AA. Around about age, late in my 25th year, I had a kind of disastrous evening. One evening with a young lady that became my first wife. And I was living, far below my so-called educational level in a really crummy apartment on Connecticut Avenue in Northwest Washington, D.C. that was catty-cornered across the street from my favorite bar, the Admiral Benbow. And I distinctly remember waking up out of a blackout one night. And I had one thing in my apartment that was worth something other than my books, and that was my bar. I had a really excellent bar. I had a wonderful bar, all kinds of great top shelf stuff. And I came out of a blackout, and I was pouring every drop down the drain, right? There are all these bottles lying around in this little kitchen area in this crummy apartment I was in. And I was saying to myself over and over again, coming out of the blackout, you have to stop, you have to stop, you have to stop.
Wow.
And the abiding mystery to me in my alcoholism is that after that night, I drank for another 13 years. Wow. And that still mystifies me. So I'm not a genetic alcoholic, but I'm very aware of the great power of alcoholism, and I had a lot of knowledge about what I should be doing as regards my alcoholism, but didn't take that knowledge and use it until I was 38 years old, and at death's door. And unlike some of us, by that time, I somehow or another, even though I was a weekend drinker, I wasn't a morning drinker or a weekday drinker. I was a weekend binger. And I managed to get myself into a pretty good career, and I was living in a pretty nice place. But the first marriage was gone. A live-in relationship for a few years after that with a very, very nice woman was gone. And I was in my pretty nice apartment, and still in downtown Washington, basically at death's door. And I was so ego-driven that I knew that I wasn't going to survive being on the street or losing my job or, excuse the expression, but I show my age sometimes by using some expressions, so I apologize. Going to the nut house or any of those other sorts of things, that I was going to kill myself. I was either, that was it. I mean, either going to, stop drinking and improve my life or kill myself. And I still don't know why, but for some reason, I picked up the phone and called the desk in DC at the Washington area intergroup office. I called the desk, and a very nice old gentleman directed me to a kind of terrible meeting called Midtown. And I went to Midtown, and sitting at the bottom of the stairs was a gentleman who's now no longer with us. This is on January the 3rd, 1987. There's this old gentleman sitting at the bottom of the stairs who I used to drink with in my favorite bar, the Admiral Benbow. I hadn't seen him around for a few years, but he was a defrocked Episcopal priest by the name of Brother John. I won't go into the details of him being defrocked, but suffice it to say there was sufficient reason for them to defrock him. And I don't know if I can use profanity on this podcast.
You can. We're actually explicit.
I can. Okay, great. All right. Well, I came down. I'm coming down the stairs, and I see Brother John. He had this long white beard. He looked like effing fucking Santa Claus. And he looked at me, and he said, very clearly, he said, John, what the fuck took you such a long time to get down here? And I looked around that room, and this was this giant meeting that subsequently became a big scandal, a place called Midtown. I won't go into it.
I think I've heard about that.
Google DC Midtown. Yeah, Washington,
Mm-hmm.
DC Midtown. There was an incredible scandal that ensued there some years later.
Yeah,
But
interesting.
and it really wasn't a place for me. I mean, even though I was smoking 2 packs of Luckies a day at that time, the which I think you might hear in my voice today, the room was so filled with smoke, even I couldn't stand it. I mean, that's an old timers meeting, right? If you remember when the rooms
I do remember the smoke. Good Lord.
It was ghastly. And, you know, and there were all these young people younger than me around, and there was a lot of stuff I didn't relate to, but I immediately related to my old friend, Brother John. And that set me on the path of finding the noon meeting in downtown Washington called BYOL, and there are 2 meetings called BYOL. And I go to what's still called, crazily enough, it's still called BYOL non-smokers. And that goes back, you know, to the days when the meeting split over smoking. They got another room. And, you know, I went to that meeting, and, you know, despite hearing a lot of things that I didn't like, I was very lucky that I heard a lot of things that I did like. And even though I was a self-identified atheist, which I have been since age 12, I didn't see a lot of pejorative or hear a lot of pejorative remarks or a lot of dissatisfaction with who and what I was. I heard a lot of joy in the room from people that were sober themselves. And I heard a lot of people supporting me in my desire to stay sober one day at a time as a person, one-on-one. And it was a great experience. But
you're describing my story there, John, too. Exactly the same damn thing. I was gonna jump off a bridge, and instead went home, called the KC Central office. A guy directed me to a meeting. Went to that meeting. You know, just identical, really, to what you're describing.
Exactly. But inevitably, you know, if you sit in these conventional meetings long enough, sooner or later, and I've written about this in some of the stuff I've written for Agnostic in the past, you know, sooner or later you're going to discover that there are the code words and the you know, and the subtle innuendos and the other you know, stuff like fake it till you make it, you know, things like the chapter to the Agnostic in the big book. And worst of all, for me, in my early days, was this thing called How It Works. It was, you know, even though we didn't read it at my noon meeting, I went to a meeting every day, and I would go to a meeting in a Catholic church on Sunday nights in 87 and 88, and probably into 89, I went to that meeting. And they would, even though it was a very high demographic, very much of a downtown DC type meeting with, you know, mostly professional people in the room, they would begin the meeting with a recitation of how it works, and they would all recite in unison. It was like Jonestown, okay? You know, would or could if he were thought, you know. And I was the only one in the room not saying that, and I would just freeze. My blood would run cold.
Let's talk about that for a little bit, because, you know, this is where, and you and I have talked about this before, because we are a little bit different in that you've been a lifelong atheist.
Yes.
Is that right?
Since age 12. That's a story.
Okay. And I have not. So I came into AA and I kind of bought the party line. You didn't quite. So tell me about, how did you feel as an atheist when you started seeing what was going on in AA?
You know, as I said, I was very lucky going to this noon meeting, you know, on, you know, at the time it was on Rhode Island Avenue, just off Connecticut in downtown DC. The people were really open, right? But there was always this coded sort of thing where, you know, and then every once in a while somebody would come up to me and, you know, lovingly grab me by the arm and say something like, "Oh, I just know that sooner or later you'll get it. Just keep coming back, all right?" And I would say, "Horseshit. I'm never going to get this." And I believe it contributed to my one close, I've been very lucky. I haven't had a slip since the day I came in. But the one day I felt close to having a slip, which was it would have had to have been in the summer of '88 when I had about 18 months. Mm-hmm. I came very close to going. My favorite bar had been closed, but there was another place that was nearby, my favorite bar called the Child Herald. I came very close to leaving my office and going to the Child Herald and ordering my favorite starting point, which was a double Jack Daniels and a Heineken back, right? And I knew exactly what I was going to do. And I'm still very, very grateful that, again, for some unaccountable reason, instead of going to the Child Herald, I went to a 5:30 after work meeting that I knew about, that some friends of mine went to. And, but I was close. And I think that part of the reason I was close is I was feeling far away from the program. And that's why when in September of that year, Maxine B. and Tom J. put an ad in the New Reporter, which is the local AA newsletter, saying that there was a meeting that was forming for atheists and agnostics that was going to meet in Maxine's apartment in a beautiful place called the Broadmoor at Connecticut and Porter, a beautiful pre-war apartment building, gorgeous place. And she had that first meeting in her apartment in September of '88, and maybe there were 8 or 10 of us that showed up at that first meeting, and I breathed a sigh of relief.
Wow. Interesting. So you were going to all these meetings. You were going to the meetings. You had how it works. You people, all that kind of crap. Right. People telling you to get it. And now you get the relief of an agnostic AA meeting. That would have been interesting. I don't know. With me, I wasn't religious, but I prayed with them. I tried to rationalize things in my mind, saying, "Okay, I'll do this stuff," thinking of some psychological benefit, and I had to put up with it for 26 years.
I know about the peer pressure. I mean, in the early days at my noon meeting, I would actually say the Lord's Prayer at the end of the meeting with them. And as a self-identified atheist, and I don't remember this guy. He wasn't around very much, but he was a young guy, and he was younger than me, and he was a believer. And this young guy came up to me after the meeting once, did me such a great favor. He asked me very clearly, he says, "You're an atheist. Why are you saying the Lord's Prayer along with everyone else?" And I said to myself, shit, why am I saying the Lord's Prayer? And this guy did me I never, from that day, never once recited the Lord's Prayer. And that was more than 25 years ago. So, that Lord's Prayer, people in AA, they don't understand how difficult that is for a lot of people. I went to a traditional meeting last night that closed with the Lord's Prayer, and I went ahead and held hands with them, but I didn't say the words. But good Lord, if they only knew the number of people they're driving away when they have to stand and hold hands and say that prayer. Well, they're speaking out of both sides of their mouth. Okay.
Yeah.
They say they're quote unquote spiritual, not religious, and then they end a meeting with something directly as a core out of the Bible. I mean, it's one of those nauseating disconnects that regular members of AA just don't understand, or a lot of them don't just.
I have a friend online. I think he's from Texas, Mark C. And he, of course, he's in Texas, like in Missouri. It's going to be like Bible Belt type country, and their meetings will end with the Lord's Prayer. Well, he is one who started sitting it out. He would stay in the room, but he'd sit in his chair. And he did this over and over, and other people started joining him. And now he says at these particular meetings he'll go to, maybe half the room might sit the prayer out.
Well, I thought that's really interesting. I mean, just this last year, I remember I told you at this noon meeting I've been going to since '87. It was early this year. Just early this year, January, February of this year, a sort of a Buddhist type guy called the group conscience at our noon meeting and they've been saying the Lord's Prayer every day for, decades, right? He called the group conscience, it was voted on, and the Lord's Prayer is out.
Wow.
It's just the Serenity Prayer now. So,
and I think on the East Coast, that's probably more prevalent. Like I went to a meeting in New York City last month, I guess, and it was a great meeting, by the way. And they closed with the Serenity Prayer. They were holding hands and everything. But boy, what a great meeting it was. The meeting itself, the content of the meeting, you would have thought you were at an Agnostic AA meeting. Well, there wasn't really any dogma or anything like that. It was just people talking about their experience, and it was a great meeting. I loved it. But they did pray, but they just didn't do the Lord's Prayer.
Well, so. We modify our behavior by learning from others.
Yeah.
Very thankfully for a lot of us, we managed to avoid the hocus pocus that would eventually get us drunk and focus on that fact that it's the fellowship, that it's the strange thing called identification, that it's the slow progression through AA life, learning from your fellow members that really gets you through.
Exactly. But, there's always been this divide in AA from the very beginning, the Akron AA and the New York AA.
Oh, yeah.
So the Dr. Bob folks, I'm in Dr. Bob country, they trust God, clean house, work with others. And then you got the Bill W. New York folks who say, what is it? Don't drink, go to meetings, and work with others.
And it continues. This guy, Wally P., that started Back to Basics, he claims in his talks, if you've got to hear everybody in our wing should listen to Wally P. at least once. But in his talk, he talks about the hand of God literally showed him the way to start back to basics inside Dr. Bob's house. Mm-hmm. That he was shown and guided by the original descendants of Dr. Bob to start the Back to Basics movement. This is the kind of crazy American Taliban stuff that's current out there.
Yeah.
And people believe it. It's just everyone if you want to get energized about Atheist Agnostic AA, listen to Wally P. sometime. I'm going to have to do that. I've listened to some of the hardcore Back to Basics stuff on the internet, and it is kind of just punch in. You can get his talks on YouTube. Just punch a Wally P. Back to Basics, and all this craziness will pop up.
I have to say, one good thing about where I live, this part of the country, is people pretty much let each other do their own thing. It's not real confrontational. But on the other hand, if I were to kind of push a little bit more, if I were to go to their meetings and sit out the Lord's Prayer and that kind of thing, oh man, I'm afraid it would be, I'd have more of a difficult road.
Well,
so
the example I encounter some things at atheist agnostic meetings, and I encountered some things out in Santa Monica that were very perplexing to me.
Yeah.
In terms of believers coming to our meetings, and I've often put it this way, and told people that Catholic retreats are very popular here in the DC area, and they've got them at up at Father Martin's and all kinds of other places around here, and basically they're Roman Catholic AA retreats, right? What possible use would I be at a Roman Catholic AA retreat? Even worse, what would I possibly do being a speaker there? All right?
Exactly. And you talk about the convention.
Yeah,
the convention itself.
We had this reverend out in Santa Monica who's a liberal reverend, but that's like me going to a Roman Catholic retreat. It doesn't make
the one sense. Thing though, in his defense, and I liked his speak. He was a trustee. He was a non-alcoholic trustee, former non-alcoholic trustee.
That's fine. But that's them, and we are us.
Right.
And I tend to we are AA, but we are also us.
Right. Now, the meetings themselves, though, I want to clarify, because at the DC meeting, they're not all atheists or agnostics.
No. Well, we have, I'd say, about 80. If I were to do we may actually do a real head count someday. But if I were just to guess, I would say about 70 or 80% of us are atheists. Another percent are agnostic. And then occasionally we get people of indeterminate belief and or Buddhist belief, right? And everybody is welcome, and and we've had people come to our meeting. I mean, we had somebody come to our meeting and talk about the steps, which is something I never heard at our meeting. But
and we talk, we and every group we do talk about the steps.
I heard of it for the first time, and since 1988, this year, I heard somebody come in and lead on the steps, and I was sort of surprised, but I didn't walk out and I didn't yell at them and tell them they couldn't do it, or know that they were perfectly, perfectly capable and open and able.
The thing about our meetings that people I don't quite understand. We are special purpose AA meetings, just like the gay meetings or an all men's meeting or a women's meeting or a meeting for medical professionals, all that kind of stuff. So we don't ever exclude anybody, but we are definitely meeting because we need a place where we can go and be ourselves and connect with other people. So we've had this issue in Kansas City where we've had believers come to our meetings, and they're totally welcome. We love to have them there. But they're going to hear things at that meeting that they won't hear at other meetings. Well, and I tell you what, some of them don't like what they hear, and I think we've chased a lot of them away.
Yeah, well, John, here's the deal, okay? Here in DC, and it's probably not to our credit, but here in DC, there are 3 atheist agnostic meetings. There's the Mothership, which I'm a member of, in DC, which meets at the Hill Center every Sunday at 11 o'clock, which is and the reason I'm giving the location in case anybody's listening and they're in DC, we're at the Hill Center on Pennsylvania Avenue, very near the Eastern Market Metro stop up on Capitol Hill. And there's one out here in Bethesda during the week, and there's one at a club over in Northern Virginia. That's 3 meetings, okay? There are over 1,200 meetings listed in the intergroup website and publications in DC. So there's 3 for us and 1,200 for them, right?
Exactly.
And that's the rub. That's the rub, okay?
Absolutely. And that's the thing here that I tell people, because, we all want to be welcoming, because we've had this conversation in our group before, is like, gosh, we seem to be driving off the believers. We need to be more tolerant of believers. And I say, listen, it's like if you go to a gay group and you hear somebody talk about their relationship with a same-sex partner or whatever, don't be shocked, okay? Because you're at a group and the same thing, if you're a believer and you go to an agnostic AA meeting, don't be shocked if somebody tells you that they don't think God has anything to do with the steps. Don't be shocked. But, that's the thing, is I guess people don't quite get that. So
let me tell you something, okay? I was writing an article about Back to Basics. There's a Back to Basics meeting here in Bethesda, Maryland, that meets once a week, and a very well attended meeting. And I went to that meeting, and much to my chagrin, okay, I said, "Oh, they really fixed me. Maybe God knew I was coming." The meeting was on the first step, which is a bedrock of my conviction. The first step, right? Yep. And I said something very nice when it was, and they came around. They saw I was a newcomer. I got to share. And I said something very nice about the meeting, but I did identify myself as an atheist member of We Agnostics Sunday group. And that was it. I didn't make any other comments about the content of Back to Basics. After the meeting, right, I identified myself as somebody who'd been, sober over 28 years. And after the meeting, I could have been a pane of glass. If people were looking right at me as if I were transparent, no expression, no how do you do, no nothing. It was really extraordinary. I've
experienced that a couple of times too.
Yeah, it was as if I had gone into one of their churches and desecrated one of their little things they have in there. All right.
Yeah, I've experienced that too.
And I wasn't at a church service. I was at an AA meeting. And that really, we've never done that at our atheist agnostic meeting.
No, same here.
Anyone, no matter
exactly.
Believe. We occasionally have these church ladies from the central office in DC come and sit in the back and check us out. Yeah. That happens from time to time.
Sure.
And we could not be more welcoming and open and friendly to them. Right? I did not experience that same warmth when I showed up at a Back to Basics meeting. That's for sure.
Yeah, I've had that experience before. I went to a meeting in a rural area of Missouri, and it's not to say that rural areas are any different, but it was a meeting where everybody was basically correcting everything I had to say. And after the meeting, they pissed me off so bad, I didn't join hands with them in the Lord's Prayer. And they had nothing to do with me after the meeting.
Let's not be all negative, okay?
No.
And I want to tell you, because I can be pretty negative because I'm a pretty militant atheist.
Yeah.
But many years ago, the job that I had for quite some years till I went and started my own business, required that I travel to some rural parts of America. Mm-hmm. And I found myself, and this was early in my sobriety, maybe 2 years in, driving down a dirt road outside of Orlando to a Pentecostal church in the dark. It's like 8:30 at night. And I came into the church parking lot, and I swear this is true. I had this standard generic rental car. Every vehicle in the parking lot was a pickup truck with a gun rack. Okay?
Yeah.
And I'm from here. I'm a lefty from DC. I looked at this place and the Pentecostal church of whatever, and I thought, oh man, am I coming out of here alive? And I thought I was going to hear those banjos from Deliverance. I thought I was going to hear the ding, 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 and it couldn't have been any more different. I went in there. I didn't identify myself as an atheist, but they certainly saw that I was from somewhere else, was somebody else that wasn't them. Yeah. And it was a great meeting, and they couldn't have been nicer to me, right? Yeah. And right then and there, I learned something, and that was they're not, this situation is more complex than it appears on the surface.
You're absolutely right. It doesn't really have so much to do with, where you live or anything like that. Let's talk a little bit about militant atheism, because here's where I'm at. I consider myself a hard atheist. In other words, you can't convince me that if God himself was in my living room, I don't believe it would be God. I think I'd be hallucinating. I am very, very certain. There's no way anyone would convince me. But I'm okay with other people having other beliefs. And I don't know. You tell me, what is a militant atheist? You tell me, because that's how you describe yourself.
There's more that there's the militant political atheist, right? Okay. Of the Madeleine Murray O'Hair strike that goes to federal court and is constantly getting up at city council meetings and yelling at them about nativity scenes and stuff like that. I'm not one of those. Okay. I am a militant person of non-belief who genuinely believes that much of the evil in the world, including that terrible event in Paris yesterday, we're reporting this just in the wake of the awfulness in Paris, is directly related to fundamentalism. All right?
Yes.
And I believe that there are Taliban in the United States, just like there are in the boondocks of Afghanistan. It's just have a different book. All right? Mm-hmm. So I believe that much of the distress and unhappiness and, yes, evil in the world comes from organized religion. That's and I absolutely know that there is no pie in the sky, no angel, little creature on my shoulder, and certainly no exterior force guiding my existence, my kids, or my wife's existence.
So I agree with you on all of that. I agree, and we're kind of getting, and then it's okay to talk about this stuff. I also agree that I think we'd be better off without religion.
Absolutely.
And if I said that to some members of my family or friends of mine, they would go crazy on me. I'm tolerant. I'm okay with people having religious beliefs, but I'm with you on that. I would think the world would be a much better place.
Yeah, our theme
but
song is Imagine by John Lennon. And
yeah.
just listen to Imagine and it's all right there, my man.
So as a militant atheist, I mean, you feel this in your bones that this is killing people. This is horrible. So you're more outspoken. Is that what I would say as a militant?
I'm more outspoken because I think that much of what is wrong in the world is connected to that, and much of the progress we made in the world. Remember, just in my opinion, Christian churches were put Christianity in the heads of African Americans to keep them in their place. That's my own personal belief. Mm-hmm. I'm sure a lot of African Americans will be outraged by that statement, but that's a belief that I have. Christian churches were so constituted to keep women in their place. Certainly, Christian churches were so constituted to keep our gay and lesbian brothers and sisters in the shadows. All right. And, we made a lot of progress in the West getting away from some of that crazy stuff. I mean, when I first went to Ireland in 1972, birth control was illegal in that country. If they found you with a condom coming into the airport in Dublin, they would confiscate it. I mean, that's in my living memory. All right. So there's just now the Irish passed the most comprehensive gay rights legislation in the EU. So there's been a lot of progress, right?
So you take this feeling you have, and I agree with all of your. So when you go to an AA meeting and you hear maybe even an agnostic person, maybe even an atheist person talking about spirituality, how do you react? How do you feel about that?
I feel, well, it's just, this is again just my opinion, and please, nobody that's listening take anything that I'm saying other than my personal opinion. I feel that people use that word to escape reality, that word to escape what's really the essential problem at hand. And Christians use that word as a code word, as a bludgeon to further their theistic agenda. All right?
I'm rolling around to your view. And, we've had some articles recently on AA Beyond Belief about the language that we use about spirituality. And I'm getting to where you are, where I think, okay, I'm okay with people doing their own thing, but the spiritual language can confuse the newcomer and disappoint the newcomer. When someone is new and you tell them they have a spiritual disease, that confuses them. What the hell are you talking about?
And it confuses them when you bring up this 12-step thing. And I know there's a big industry and a lot of people making a lot of money now writing this alternative 12 steps and all that other bullshit.
Yeah.
Right? But, for me, the only thing that's ever worked that's made any sense is step 1, step 10, and 50% of step 12. And I totally and completely and categorically reject the rest. I do not, at my core meeting on every Wednesday, they have a step meeting. That's the flip part of it is every week, Wednesday at my core meeting, there's a step meeting. I do not attend on Wednesdays because it would be disrespectful of me to do so and argue with those people about that part of their core belief every week. So
now our mutual friend from DC who goes to our meetings here, he says exactly the same thing that you say about those steps, but he still goes to our step meetings and everything. Now let me ask you this. This is how I feel about the steps. First of all, they are suggestions. You're not going to, if you don't do the steps, you're not going to be condemned to drunkenness or death. It's absolutely, they're not essential in my opinion. And I will say that at any AA meeting, they're not essential, and that will drive a lot of people crazy. But for me, they are beneficial.
Well,
and I think, so I use them.
That's a personal decision. I don't need a moral arbiter. Okay. I think I can stay out of jail and pretty much on the straight and narrow without the steps. All right.
Right.
And I believe that most of the steps are coded Oxford Group Christian pablum designed to bring you in a close contact with a deity. And it is, to me, superfluous and confusing and condescending for an atheist, particularly an atheist member, to be subjected to the constrictions in most of those steps. Having said that, step one saved my life, and I love Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson. How's that? Okay.
That's good.
I love Bill. I love Dr. Bob, but I don't love all their bullshit.
Yeah. And you know what, John? I might evolve from this too, because where I'm at right now in my life doesn't mean I'm going to be here 5 years from now. But right now, I've rewritten the steps for myself, and I do like. I have to interpret the steps. I can't take them as they're written. And a lot of people in our group, they've done the same thing for themselves. They just write them out. What do they mean to them as an individual? Wow. But you know what? 5 years from now, I might say, you know what? I don't need any of that crap. But for now, that's where I'm at.
Well, you know what? I often quote my patron saint, who's going to be quoted in this article coming out tomorrow. But one of my other favorite quotes from Robert Zimmerman of Minnesota is, you don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. Mm-hmm. And once you're sober and in communication with your fellow alcoholics and the process of identification has taken hold, and you're learning from their actual life experience and how they handle things, you don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. Mm-hmm. I learned about aging when I was 40 from, my friends Tom and Maxine, who started who are now dead. I saw them going through certain things in their elder years, which are now that I'm almost 67, it's dawning on me that I learned from them a lot about how to live as an older person with the limitations and the issues that inevitably ensue, and to embrace the positive things. And I learned that in AA meetings, watching how people behave, not what they recite, not what fucking books they read. Yep. It's how they behave. Yep. Okay, we know people that say they're holy who are real devils, don't we? Mm-hmm. We all do. Okay? Mm-hmm. So, signing up to some atheist agnostic apostles' creed just isn't for me. Right. And I'll be struggling with that all the way along, because I know that I probably, from that point of view, it probably discomforts some of my fellow atheists and agnostics.
Yeah. And John, your article, you talk about the myth of the angry atheist. And here's my theory on that.
That's sort of ironic, John.
It is. Okay. But here's my theory on that. I don't see you as angry. And I hear other militant atheists say things, and they're not saying it out of anger. However, I think that they say things that will cause a reaction in people because they're not used to hearing it. And they're projecting their own anger or discomfort upon the deliverer of the news. What do you think?
Well, if I said what I said today in Boston in 1680, I would have been drug out and lashed to a pole and burnt to death. Right? Mm-hmm. Okay. It's. I would have been called a warlock. I believe they would have called me. Okay. Yep. Child of Satan. Okay. Fortunately, we don't, unless we're running around the backwoods of Pakistan or Afghanistan or Iraq, we don't have to worry, or Syria, we don't have to worry about that too much these days. But there's some of that out there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, So when you're talking to me, and because you're okay with whatever I do with, working the steps, whatever, but when I hear that from you, and I'm okay with you saying all that stuff, but maybe some people will hear that and they say, oh, he's angry because he rejects the rewritten steps, so he must be angry. But you're not really angry. You're just talking about where you're sharing your experience. You're saying what you believe.
Right. I reject stuff that doesn't mean anything to me.
Right.
But that's just me.
Right.
I
So if people construe that as being angry, I think that they've got it wrong. I think that they're misunderstanding. You're just because when we open our meeting, we have this atheist agnostic preamble where we say, you have a right to reject spirituality. This is about and so people have to understand if someone rejects it, they have that right, and you shouldn't label that as being angry.
Well, by the way, the way that we open and close our meeting is with the best piece of AA literature ever written, which is the AA preamble. Okay, right, and not one word about anything else. Yeah. We don't need to point any. We feel, I believe, the sense of the group. I can't speak for the group as a whole, of course, but to me, it seems that we felt over the years that, you don't need to be pointed in the right direction. You just need to know that you're in a safe, accepting, welcoming place with people that have experience that can be of value to you, and your experience can be of value to them. Yep. We don't need directions, John.
Yeah, I agree with that. And in fact, there's, oh Lord, we could just go on. I hate it when people refer to the steps as directions, and I hear that sometimes.
Well, that's what they are. They're a fucking list of directions. What do you think they are?
Well, when I was in New York, they had on at this meeting I went to in New York, and I understand this is how the steps used to always be in AA halls. It said the 12 suggested steps. At this meeting, but yeah, I know you don't. But just from the Midwest, when I see that said that, I think, wow, that's great. I love that. I wish that we had that over our steps here, because people here, they do think of them more as specific rules and directions, and they aren't. Well, anyway, enough of that. So what do you think? What's your feeling about the future of it seems like that we've been having more and more of these agnostic atheist AA meetings springing up all over the place. How do you feel about the future of that?
I believe in progress, but I believe that the message of who and what we are in this movement needs to be more clearly articulated. The tenor of what I saw come out of the Santa Monica Convention was such that one would tend to believe that we're a group of Buddhist, agnostic, pagan, dreamy, whatever. Very confusing message.
Right.
Now, every AA meeting and every AA gathering is open to any self-identified or unself-identified AA member who wants to attend, who isn't drunk and disruptive. Okay, so you can't, you can't, and you won't stop anybody from attending, but very clearly articulating who and what you are is very important, and that's not being done. And I feel that we need to be more definitive about what we say we are.
Yeah.
In order to get the proper direction to move forward to the future, to be what we need to be, which is a beacon of hope for desperate and despairing atheists and agnostics and other non-believers, whatever they call themselves, who can't make it in regular AA.
Yeah. I think we could learn a lot from the gay groups and their history and about how they started, because they went through some things. And I'm not an expert on this, but I've been reading a book, The History of Gay People in AA. It's a pretty interesting book. But they were when they were first starting out, they had a really hard time at regular meetings and so forth. So they started these gay groups. And the traditional AA people, they didn't want these groups listed. They didn't like the gay groups, and they weren't accepted. But the gay groups were there. They weren't going to go away, and gay members in AA, they were very involved in service. So they were answering the phones at central office. Mm-hmm. They were they were out there, and you just had to accept them because they were such a huge part of the fellowship. They were coming out. That's the thing. And I think that's what's happening with us now is we're starting to come out in the open And the more that we do that, I think that the more people are going to realize, hey, these people are here. They are part of us. But if we're not coming out like the gay people did, if we're not doing that, then they're not going to know we're here. And if they don't know we're here, why even bother with trying to accept us?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And to do that, to some degree, we have to have a degree of consensus. And I feel that the consensus that's been forming, particularly around this next convention in Austin, does not represent the majority of the atheist and agnostic members in the United States. I believe that it's gone in a different direction. And I personally am going to be working both before, during, and after that convention to try to bring to what I consider it to be more back to the center. But just like everything else in service, you're never going to get 100% of what you want. There's going to be a group conscience, and then that's going to be that.
I have to agree with you. Now, I have to say, the convention I went to in Santa Monica was the best AA convention I've ever been to, and it was a real turning point in my life. But I have to agree with you that, and as much as I loved all the speakers and everything, there weren't any hard atheists really represented as any of the keynote
there
speakers.
Was one.
Like that.
Our friend John C. from Paris there was one.
Ah, okay. I don't know. I'm gonna have to listen to his tape. When did he speak?
It was early I think it was fairly early on the first day, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. That's it. And I missed the first day. I came into California a little bit late, and I had a horrible headache. And anyway, so I missed the first. I missed the Friday.
Yeah, he's a little busy in Paris today, but he may have a clip for you. You should send him an email.
I was wondering about that. He's in Paris now.
Oh yeah, he was there last night when this thing went down.
God. So what's he doing? Is he just in his apartment?
Yeah, he's. I guess so. Yeah, he's fine. I sent him a text, and he replied back that they were fine. They were at a Woody Allen movie, not a heavy metal rock show, so they did all right. It's a terrible, terrible night in the City of Light. I love that city, and to think that these God-inspired creatures came out of the sewers to do that is really a terrible, terrible thing.
It's unimaginable. Okay, so that's interesting, John. So our movement here, we've got agnostics, atheists, free thinkers, we've got militant atheists, we've got
you tell me, John, let me stop you for a minute. What in the hell is a free thinker? Nobody can tell me. I've been to graduate school, I've been to post-grad, I've been various places, I've lived all over the world, but nobody can explain to me what a free thinker is. Please do so.
We have a guy we have someone who's writing an article now about free thinking, and I'm going to be interviewing someone about free thinking pretty soon. But here's what I think about it. I think most free thinkers come to the conclusion that they're atheists, but not all of them do. But I think a free thinker is just one who does not go with the traditional beliefs. So in other words, I was not a free thinker at one time. I came to AA and I just accepted everybody else's beliefs. I didn't question. I didn't think for myself. And I think a free thinker is more likely to think for themselves and question the traditional beliefs and not just accept them. That's
what does that mean?
Well, I don't know.
What does it mean? Okay, here's the thing about us atheists. We're always going to ask, what does it mean?
Yeah.
What precisely are you saying? That's not very popular in America, particularly, to say, think clearly, speak clearly, say what you mean, and mean what you say.
Right.
That can't be the most popular position sometimes, but that's the kind of crap you'll hear from me until I croak.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So that's what we have going on in our movement. We have these different, and they had the same thing in the gay movement. There was a time when you had the lesbians were calling for more rights. And the gay men weren't necessarily recognizing the lesbian women as equal and having responsibilities. So anyway, it's kind of, I'm not an expert on this, but they had the same type of situation going on with them. So, I think that eventually we'll get this all sorted out.
I would think so. I hope I'll be around when that happens, but it's going to take probably another 20 years or so to sort this crap out. But, like anything else, there's, and the other thing is, John, there's no fight like an AA fight. Okay.
Yeah, that's for sure.
You get a bunch of alcoholics in a room, there's going to be a fight eventually. Right?
Yeah, and I'm just now experiencing that in my program. Now, I do a lot of service work here in Missouri and Kansas City, and we don't really fight so much around here. I mean, everything is pretty peaceful and nice, but getting involved with the greater, international agnostic, atheist AA movement, whatever. There's people of all kinds of opinions and they hold them very strongly. And so that's new for me to have that kind of, but it's exciting too. I mean, it's important. I mean, these are ideas and, they need to be discussed and they need to be discussed passionately sometimes. So,
but there's ideas and then there's the bottom line. The bottom line is there are young atheists, agnostics, non-believers dying out there in the bars and in the drug dens and on the streets that can't benefit from conventional AA because they walk in there, hear that stuff, turn around and walk out. And alcoholics always want to have, and addicts always want to have an excuse to continue their abuse, right? And our function is so incredibly important for the non-believer. We're literally in the life and death business. I don't want to over dramatize it.
You're right.
That's another characteristic of alcoholics. We tend to be a little over dramatic.
No, but here you're telling the truth.
Yeah, I'm one of them. Yeah, but I'm telling the absolute truth. Look at old fart like me with almost 29 years. Unless I go completely out of my mind, it's very unlikely that I'm going to have a drink before I die. All right. Yeah. So I'm not that worried about myself. I'm very, very concerned about young people pissing useful years of life away. And here's the deal. You and I and the other old timers and the other members of our wing of the fellowship, what we're going to be able to do, if we're lucky, we're going to be able to give other human beings useful years of life back.
There you go.
My doctors can do that, but I don't know too many people other than my doctors that can really do that. Do you?
No, and you are absolutely right. That's the bottom line. And you know what? I'm seeing that here. We get a lot of, actually, quite a bit of young people who come to our meeting specifically because they heard that this meeting exists. That's a secular AA meeting. They would not go to any other AA meeting.
Right.
And they come to ours, and so thank goodness for that we have a place where people can go and get better, and we're growing quickly here. It's just amazing. We're going to outgrow the room that we meet in pretty soon, probably.
Well, you've done incredible service out there, and I watched the growth of your meetings there in Kansas City in awe, because you really have done tremendous service. I'm hearing all this stuff about meetings in places like Alabama. Who would have ever thought that we would have, meetings out in the middle of the desert somewhere out west, all this stuff going on. And, I'm really heartened by that. But
me too.
If we don't clarify our message and clearly say who and what we are, I think we're going to encounter difficulties down the road.
I agree. Let's talk about just real quickly, just before we end this conversation. Sure. I guess you're gonna go to a convention in, I can't remember, in Washington State, right?
I saw this thing, and you said it to me. There's this link for this meeting in Olympia, Washington, in January I believe it's on the 16th of January. And I looked at the agenda, and it was really intelligently written. And, they really seem to have a handle on what they were doing. And I have some creative writing projects I'm working on. And a very dear old friend of mine is a pretty well-known writer out in the Seattle area. And I've been meaning to go out and spend a couple of days with him with one of my manuscripts to go over some stuff. And I've got another old friend there who's a musician in Seattle from my college days. He's a working musician in Seattle, and I've been meaning to go see him. So I saw this thing, and I said, hell, I've got a free ticket in the can, and I booked it yesterday. So I'm really great. And I communicated with a lady out there who seems very nice, and I sent her an email back, and that's just another example of what's going on. I mean, they had that regional forum that you did the podcast on in Phoenix. I don't know how that's gone, but then they have this thing that's popped up in Olympia, and who knows what else is going to come up.
Yep, I need you to write about that when you finish when you come back from there. Write up a little piece about what you experienced there, and I'm going to have Jerry write something about what happened.
I was supposed to write for Roger about the international convention, but unfortunately I had a medical issue come up and I couldn't go to Atlanta. But this time I think I'll actually make it to this place, and it looks really interesting. I would urge anybody that wants to take a look at a really good AA agenda to look at that. You might want to put that I will. That link up on your site.
I need to. I will do that. Well, John, it has been wonderful. It's been really great talking to you. I'm glad that I got to know you and meet you. I don't run into very many John H's here in Kansas City.
Well, so I'm just an old white man with a lot of opinions. So I'm just another one of them, another talking head. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So we'll talk to you soon.
All right. You take
care, buddy. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, that's it for another episode of AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and that we can talk again real soon. Thank you.